She was told, you're going to work as a prostitute. She'd never even thought of it before, never encountered it before. She spoke no English. She was told the terminology, what she had to do, how much she charged, and that was just her for the next few years.
They brought me to Belfast. I was made to work as a sex slave. I felt like a battery hen, but for sex.
We're seeing many more foreign nationals being brought in. It raised some suspicion about who was controlling this in Belfast and was there exploitation.
They say if I don't stop crying and do exactly what they say, that they're going to kill my mom.
We would see the victims transported to Stockholm or Belfast, and after a period, then that would move to the next city. This was transnational crime that needed a transnational response.
They took a passport, she was beaten, threatened.
We would track who the money went to and follow that money, so to speak, to find out who was controlling it. We were speaking to the Swedes, we were speaking to the Romanians, we were speaking to Europol. At 1:30 p.m. on that day, we gave the order from Belfast to implement the operation.
Oh, please.
My name is Rachel Miskelly. I am currently a detective inspector in the PSNI's organised crime branch, and at the time of this investigation, I was a detective constable in the same branch. I had always wanted to be a detective and was very lucky that when I passed my detective exams, I went into the organised crime branch. We would generally focus on proactive operations. They varied in type. They could be drugs, robberies. At times, we would receive intelligence to say there is a brothel, and as a proactive unit, we would actively take measures to attend such properties in order to safeguard people and to see if there is any criminality. Sometimes it materialises, sometimes it didn't. In June 2012, a young woman approached police and indicated that she had been a victim of trafficking. I met with her, and it was just an initial conversation in a coffee shop, very informal. It's all about obviously making her comfortable. The picture she portrayed of what she went through was horrific.
The young woman was in her early 20s and from Romania. She became known as Witness A. Her words are taken from interviews and legal documents and are spoken by an actor.
I was working as a cleaner to make some money. One day, like any other, I was walking from one house to the next cleaning houses, when suddenly I was snatched off the streets. I was kidnapped. I felt someone grabbing me from the back. They dragged me, put me in the car, then locked the door straight away. Then they just drove off. I didn't know where they were taking me. I had no idea. Then they tell me they know who my mom is back home in Romania. They know my mom's name. They know her address. They say if I don't stop crying and do exactly what they say, that they're going to kill my mom. Someone said the words, "This one looks better." At that point, I knew I was to be sold for my body.
It's unimaginable. You know, you might read about it, but whenever you're hearing it from somebody, you realise just the consequences, the impact it has on them.
I was made to work as a sex slave. They advertised me online, then customers would come for sexual services. They would move me from place to place, renting flats to make a pop-up brothel. For example, in Belfast, there was a flat with 2 bedrooms. They never really gave us food or water. The living conditions were just awful.
It's obviously horrible to hear. It shouldn't happen, but it does happen. So we will take every step, do everything in our power to make sure that, you know, that they are safe.
I'm Dougie Grant, Detective Chief Inspector. I'd been serving in the PSNI for about 20 years when the case began. Like any police officer, I started in uniform policing. And eventually, I wanted to get into organised crime to use tactics against the most serious criminality that we're seeing. And thankfully, I got selected for C1 Organised Crime Branch and led a team called Gold Team within C1. Human trafficking was a new area for us. At that time that we started the investigation, people still wouldn't admit that it couldn't happen here. It couldn't happen in Northern Ireland. It was becoming so prevalent and so common. We were seeing many more foreign nationals being brought in to work in that industry, and it raised some suspicion about who was controlling this in Belfast and was there exploitation.
Detectives began examining the websites where the women were advertised. In 2012, these sites were still a new phenomenon.
We were seeing in our general life a huge digitalisation of everything we do, online shopping, online services, websites, and criminality is no different.
Adult services websites are obviously where sexual services are offered by escorts. It was new to me. I hadn't really heard of it before. At that time, the advertisements were generally in newspapers, whereas then we seen it evolve the online world, and that's when it just seemed to expand and boom.
As the team investigated further, they discovered evidence of brothels springing up right across Northern Ireland and suspected other women were being trafficked.
As a result of the information that Witness A provided us, we had attended a brothel and spoke to a number of young women.
But Rachel and Dougie immediately faced a problem.
We didn't get the support of the victims. They wouldn't engage. And we thought that would be an easy thing to do, but it wasn't. We would go into the premise under a search warrant. We would identify the potential victims, and we'd say, we're here to help you, and we'd offer them places of safety. And we had a victim support network that would support and look after any victims that we identified. We would offer all the support and services to remove them from that exploitation, but they just wouldn't take it.
The victims were simply unable to break from the physical and psychological control of the sex trafficking ring.
Over time, they were just so groomed. They are told, you fear the police. They were schooled what to say. If you ever encounter police, you say you're on holiday, you know, the police are corrupt. They didn't trust us.
Witness A had been held captive by the gang for 10 months. Breaking the cycle of coercive control had not been easy for her.
I was thinking to escape. That was my thought. But they knew where my mom was. They knew everything about me. I thought I couldn't talk to the police, so I had nothing to cling on to. You want to run. That's one side of it. You want that. But at the same time, you can't run. I had nowhere to go. I didn't think things could get much worse. And then one day, I heard my captors talking about plans to take me to the Middle East. So I knew my opportunity to escape was now or never. So I opened the door and I just ran. I had freedom, and that's why I went to the police.
Witness A's experiences, the number of websites offering sexual services, were evidence of a criminal enterprise entirely new to Dougie and his team.
At that time, prostitution in Northern Ireland, it was local. It wasn't an organised crime issue. It wasn't in that severe category of criminality that we would see. So this had changed. As we gathered more intelligence and evidence, we identified a Romanian-based crime gang. They would traffic normally Romanian women into Belfast. We would see first an advance party coming in, as we called it, and that would be one or two individuals who would start renting properties, who would start putting the advertising on the various websites, who would start taking the calls and bookings. And then following that advance party, then we'd have the victims who would be travelling in, and the victims would be taken to the locations that had been set up. And then within sometimes minutes, the sex buyers would be arriving to avail of the services. They would operate for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then the women would be moved to a new city or location, and we'd see it happening. The cycle would continue then again.
Detectives Dougie and Rachel now began to look at the individuals running the trafficking ring.
Witness A gave us the details of the organised crime group members. A male principal, Ilya Annett, and his partner. And Kuda Swartz would have been what we would refer to as an alpha female. They're the controller. They are generally in the presence of the other females who they make to operate as escorts, and it's obviously to have that control over them.
Identifying the ringleaders was one thing, but proving their involvement in court wouldn't be as easy. So police turned to the digital evidence left by the gang's online activities. It showed their trafficking and prostitution ring was international in scale.
As part of our new developing area of cyber investigations, we started scraping data from different websites and looking for commonality in advertising and imagery. And it started highlighting that there was commonality. We were seeing the same images go to other European countries. But predominantly, it was between Sweden, Stockholm, and Northern Ireland, Belfast. And that's what we were seeing, the movement of the images. 2 weeks in one location, 3 weeks in one location, then moving to the next location.
Because of cyber capabilities, we were able to see that the profiles or the pictures used here in Northern Ireland were also used in the south of Ireland and Sweden. Hence why we've seen the connection. We could then see the movement of the victims and the suspects into Sweden.
The data from the website was critically important because it showed the locations where they're operating from. They were using IP addresses and identifying where they were accessing the internet.
The team's digital investigation showed the gang was active in Northern Ireland and Sweden, but it was run from Romania, home to Ilya Annett and Kuda Swartz.
We identified the Romanian gang were based initially in Bucharest, and then we would see the victims transported to Stockholm or Belfast. The images uploaded onto the websites, and after a period, then that would move to the next city. This was transnational crime that needed a transnational response.
My name is Per Hjort. I'm a detective sergeant at the Swedish police. When the case came in Stockholm, I was working with a division that's worked against human trafficking for sexual purposes. We got a phone call from the PSNI and said that they had seen websites and the Romanian ring working in Belfast. And they said that we had the same girls on different websites. We kept in contact, sharing some information. They all started when our prostitution squad noticed a girl in a part of Stockholm. They went there and they noticed that she was working and there was customers.
Detectives continued their surveillance of the young woman, whose face they recognised from images on sex websites used by the gang in Northern Ireland. She became known to the investigation as Witness B.
We had 2 surveillance teams and we were filming the gang, where they lived, meeting customers, following them around. It was our division. It was the whole section. So we had witness B on lots of pictures. We had some surveillance, see what she was doing. She was working, she was going on out calls to hotels and taking customers in their apartment, so we needed statements from witness B. She was the key witness to get the things to court.
Witness B eventually agreed to give a statement. She revealed how she had been deceived by the traffickers and transported across Europe, only to be forced into prostitution. First in Belfast, and then in Stockholm.
During that period when we get more and more information, it was clear that she was a victim.
Witness B's words are taken from her own statements and are voiced by an actor.
I was 18 years old, living in Romania. A neighbor knew Ancuța Schwarz, and that I could get some work if I came to Northern Ireland. She said it would only be webcam posing, sitting in front of a computer in sexy clothes. Schwarz paid for my flight in March 2011. When I arrived, Ionuț picked me up from the airport, and Schwarz was waiting at the apartment we went to. She explained to me that it wouldn't be online work. Instead, I would have to perform sexual services. I was in shock, but saw no other option but to do as I was told. On my very first day, within hours of landing at the airport, I had to take a customer.
A year later, she was still in the control of the gang and being trafficked between Belfast and Stockholm.
Then we contacted the PSNI again. Dougie and Rachel said that there are more Romanian girls probably heading for Sweden.
The victims were being transported through so many jurisdictions that the PSNI and the Swedish Police Authority decided to seek international cooperation across Europe.
On normal investigations with an international footprint, we'd usually reach out directly to the law enforcement in that particular country. But on this occasion, we decided to approach Europol. Europol is a European police agency based in The Hague.
It was my first joint investigation team. It was a new thing to work with colleagues abroad. I had big cases before. This was a new ballpark.
Detectives brought in the global expert in human trafficking investigations to assist the team.
My name's Kevin Hyland, and I'm a former UK police officer. I was the head of the human trafficking unit for New Scotland Yard.
Kevin Hyland has investigated how human trafficking gangs operate internationally and provided insights to the United Nations.
At this time, I had done a number of what we call joint investigation teams with a number of countries. The team from Northern Ireland came to meet with me, and everyone agreed that this was a case that would benefit from having investigation capability in Northern Ireland with Sweden and with Romania as a partner.
It enabled us to share information at a fast pace and obviously move the investigation on probably much quicker than it would have been done previously.
The notion of, this kind of coercive control in the issue of human trafficking, it was always used. I remember I used to talk about the invisible handcuffs. Most of these people who came over had never been to the UK before, had never been outside of their region. And they just become like robots with no decision-making. And so they were just completely disorientated. So when they were told go from A to B, that's what they did.
Kevin recommended the Northern Irish and Swedish task force begin a coordinated surveillance strategy. In Belfast, this meant sending undercover officers into the brothels.
The objectives of those covert deployments, it was to engage with the adverts, find the premises, and then gather evidence inside those premises about the controllers, the security, the victims themselves. When we're in premises, be it a hotel room, be it an apartment, there's lots of different things we're looking for. Ultimately, this is about gathering evidence so we could save the victims. But the level of organisation and control and security and safety checks that the crime gang would put in place, it was extreme. Being searched for recording devices, being checked for covert cameras, being screened before you come into the premises, that you're sent to a standoff location so they can look to see if there's surveillance around you. It was a challenging situation. Our officers were unaccustomed to this. So we had to train them, we had to educate them, we had to gather information about how this business operated and how sex buyers operated, and that was a challenge. Some existing sex workers would work with us to tell us how this worked normally, what to look for and what the signs were, and that actually really helped us in the investigation.
In particular, undercover officers were able to gather information about the gang's financial activities.
One of the main inquiries for us around the suspects was financial work. We could see that there was a lot of money transactions being made at money services bureaus. The young women who were being exploited were either going in and lodging the money. It wasn't actually the suspects doing it themselves. The girls were having to do it.
We would track who the money went to and follow that money, so to speak, to find out who was controlling it. And then when we gathered the evidence, we had the documentation showing that it was paid to the head of the crime gang back in Romania.
And that was Ili Anit and his partner Ankuta Schwartz, the same two people Witness A had named as being her traffickers. Detectives were now in no doubt about the focus of their investigation.
The two ringleaders for the gang were a couple, Ili Anit and Ankuta Schwartz. Ili Anit is the head of the gang. They were Romanian nationals, and they had been involved in controlling prostitution, and we suspected human trafficking for many years.
The gang leaders themselves were now placed under surveillance in Sweden and in their native Romania. It revealed how Anit was spending the money he'd earned from trafficking women.
Ili Anit would stay in the majority of his time in Romania, but we were aware from the evidence that was being gathered by the Swedish law enforcement and others that he was making a lot of money. He would party, he had new cars, he was living a very expensive lifestyle, and all this was coming from the exploitation of the women.
Ilya was just collecting money back in Romania. He was the top dog in the ring, so he was all involved big time, I will say.
Ankuta Schwartz and Anit were using the money that was being made because they wanted this luxury life back in Romania, whereas people were being exploited to get that. I think it was great.
If you take a girl like Witness B, we could see that she'd been in Sweden over 100 days during the period. And she said that she had approximately 4 to 5 customers a day.
The amount of money that was being made could be as much as £100,000 a year per woman. So, you know, you think if you've got 10, you're a millionaire. And your outlay, you know, rental properties weren't as expensive then as they are now. They would bring people over on the cheapest routes, so everything would be done at the cheapest cost. And then your return was enormous.
In Stockholm, the surveillance operation revealed key details about how the sex trafficking ring operated.
That was Ankuta was in control here. And also Ilya showed up sometimes in Sweden as well, and we were gathering economic transactions and started to see how much money they spent on flats and everything, collecting all the evidence. They rented flats. Sometimes they had 2, 3 flats. They also made out calls, customer calls for a girl, and then they had their own drivers. If they didn't have any drivers on scene, they would send them by taxi. They rented in different parts of the downtown Stockholm. It builds the case. You can see what What do they do? How many customers do they have, and which apartments do they operate today, or where are they going now? And if you follow the girls from one flat, they can also give service in another flat. You can see the customer on the outside waiting to get the code to come in, and then you can follow him across the yard, and he goes into one of the staircases. It shows how they operate. It's not that far from here. We can walk to one of the flats, 600 meters or something from the city hall. We are now at a place where they rented apartments to give services for sexual purposes. And on the other side of the street, 15 meters on the other side, there's the Stockholm Police Department, and we have the police headquarters on the other side of the street, so they were quite near. During the surveillance, we saw a guy coming on a bicycle with a small toddler. He stopped by kindergarten, delivered the children, and on his way back home in the same area, he then stopped and made a visit in one of those apartments.
The customers would call the number on the profile on the website. Ancuța would usually answer and arrange the visits. The services listed on my profile were extreme. 69, anal sex, bondages, fetishes. I had to do everything Ancuța said.
It seems like some people think it's not a big deal. It's a transaction. Everything was fine, but if you look behind the mask, it's a victim. She's not there by free will. That's an illusion. Once you're trapped, you're trapped.
As one man after another visited the apartment, Witness B followed the gang's orders and transferred large sums of money back to Romania.
One responsibility they gave me was depositing the money at the money exchange places. The cash was always wired to Schwartz or Ionuț or their families back in Romania. They made me take pictures of the paperwork to prove I'd sent all of it.
The gang controlled the women by telling them they would be given money to send back to their families.
If that's the only way you can support your family back home, and you have gone that far, so you sell your body to send money back to Romania. They told the parents probably back home that they were doing au pair service or work as a cleaner or whatever. And the family were dependent on them to survive.
But the women saw none of the money.
They told me I'd keep half the money earned. I was in debt from the beginning. I was told the flight needed to be paid off, and after that there were always more costs. For example, website costs, always costs. So I never got paid anything, and all the money went to Ancuța. This is the way it worked for all the girls. The girls and me would be moved from place to place throughout Northern Ireland, places in Belfast, then in Sweden, Stockholm, places near there, then back to Northern Ireland. You lose track of where you are. After a while, it's all the same. Sweden, Northern Ireland, it's all the same.
Witness B was by now living under the total control of Ancuța Schwartz.
Over time, Ancuța got me to do more of her work. Organizing the flats, she'd send me out for groceries and to do the laundry, that kind of thing. I had to do everything Ancuța said. At first glance, someone might think we were friends, but it was more like I was her prisoner.
My name's Diane, and I work for Belfast and Lisburn Women's Aid. I think one of the things is we see that women look like they're walking about on their daily lives. They're able maybe to go to the shop. Why do they not just leave and find help? And I think that's where we look at the definition and we look at what coercive control actually is.
Diane works to support survivors of human trafficking and sexual abuse.
The fear that women experience, what's out there, where are they going to go when they leave, the mistrust, who does she turn to, who does she go to? That psychological imprisonment is what actually women are experiencing, that they feel they cannot escape, they cannot go anywhere through a matter of fear and desperation.
Surveillance in Stockholm provided Dougie and Rachel with valuable intelligence, but the investigation was about to be transformed with evidence gathered by Swedish police using a power unavailable to detectives in Northern Ireland: phone tapping.
The European law enforcement agencies used what we call telephone intercept very extensively for gathering evidence. It's not something in the UK that we'd ever be allowed to do in that kind of situation. But getting access to that level of intelligence was critical for us. We were able to gather more information on the sex buyers, how they were interacting.
The wiretaps captured a side of the victims' lives that the surveillance footage could not.
It was very difficult to listen to some of the telephone calls. Just give it a minute.
Să faci bani aici pizda să te țină. Lânchinii trebuie să-i scol la pensie, că dă curând. Îți dai dracu de bani de-astea, dacă vrei să facem treaba așa cum spun eu. Da, domne, e acceptat, da, domne, că tare, ok, dacă e dracu. Da, tot o să mă caute, că n-are ce să fac, înțelegi?
On the wiretap, we heard a kunta talking about witness B. Witness B was treated very bad. They took her passport, she was beaten, threatened. In the mornings, a kunta will check the mobile phones, have any customer made any calls during the night. We had heard on the wiretaps a kunta yelling at her, "Why don't you answer the phone? Come back in 50 minutes, otherwise I kill you. Finish that customer. You have another customer waiting here."
Clients could also be heard on the wiretap complaining if a victim was unwilling to perform certain sexual acts.
Hello.
Hello.
What is your problem?
She do what is in the profile. It's only like that. You understand? You don't talk to some bullshit idiot. Listen, we start with this.
If you want, I can send now, okay? No problem.
Okay. Okay, then I call police. Pa.
Ankuta Schwartz would shout at me and beat me. It really hurt. I was only allowed to sleep 3 or 4 hours per night. She would spit on me to wake me up. Things got worse. Worse than the services listed on the website. I was made to receive customers even when I was having my period. Sometimes I had clients who demanded that condoms not be used. Schwartz made me go with all of this. She told me a wet wipe could be inserted in my vagina for protection. I really believed her. So I did this. I never wanted to do this.
Financial records, surveillance footage, and phone recordings all implicated Iliad Annett and Ankuta Schwartz. But to prove they were controlling prostitution in Belfast, Dougie needed to prove that the pair were in the city. So he went back to basics.
This investigation was being conducted in a number of ways, and through the digital evidence, we identified IP addresses that were being used, and that brought us to this area that we believed had been used by the group. And some of our investigators were fantastic, and they just decided, let's just do what we call old school policing, just to go and knock on doors and ask people, did you see anything? Have you seen anything suspicious in the area over the last few weeks or months?
Now, these old school methods brought new information.
To everyone's surprise and shock, they knocked a door, a gentleman answered, and they explained what they were there for, and he said, I know exactly what you're looking for. And he produced photographs that he had taken of what he called suspicious activity. And that suspicious activity was foreign nationals that had come in with young women, and they appeared to be in control of them, and it didn't sit right with them. We couldn't believe it. It was the ringleaders from the gang. It was the two suspects that we'd always identified in other countries, but we never managed to get them all together in Belfast, and we now had a picture of them. The photograph that we obtained, it put the two main suspects on the ground at the time in the area of the establishments that were being used for this. It was critical for us. It just moved the investigation on weeks, if not months. All the different layers of evidence, from the travel, from the website bookings, from the IP evidence, the verification photographs, it was all building the picture. At some point, we had to say, let's go now. And I was in discussions with my counterpart in Sweden. And as we were having that meeting one day, we got a notification that the victims were moving again. The adverts were being brought down. They were going to set up somewhere else. Would they go back to Stockholm? Would they come back to Belfast? We didn't know. So we made an immediate decision at that point. It's now. Now, let's do this now.
Detectives in all three countries now planned an audacious operation. A coordinated strike on the gang in Northern Ireland, Romania, and Sweden.
We needed to arrest Ilyanot as well, and he was in Romania, so it was to get everything in one, all the small pieces in one bucket.
At this point, we said, we have victims in Belfast, we have victims in Stockholm, so let's take action now. And that was decided to be the 25th of April, 2013. We said we're going to have the day of action right across Europe simultaneously.
In Stockholm, police needed to rescue victims from the control of their traffickers. In Bucharest, police planned to arrest Ili Anit, and in Belfast, Dougie's target was Nkuda Schwartz, who was in control of Witness B. And this all had to happen at exactly the same moment.
As I was sitting in the control van in the street, we were speaking to the Swedes, we were speaking to the Romanians, we were speaking to Europol. At 1:30 p.m. on that day, we gave the order from Belfast to implement the operation. We didn't want to send dozens of people into a premises because it just overwhelmed the situation and the victims. Whilst we had dozens of officers deployed, we tried to reduce the numbers that actually went into the premises, so maybe 6 officers going in initially, but ready to respond if the situation escalated inside.
So please. Police officers.
I'm arresting you under Section 3, Swedish Penal Code. What is it?
This warrant has been obtained for offences committed in Sweden.
But I'm here, no in Sweden.
Yes, these offences occurred in Sweden.
For what? What can I do in Sweden? Aggravated procuring. What is this? Prostitution.
Prostitution.
Prostitution, right.
We identified 2 victims in Belfast. We made the arrests, and simultaneously we were doing arrests in Bucharest, gathering all the digital evidence, the telephones and the laptops, the computers. In Sweden, more victims being rescued.
What is it? I know this.
It's challenging. I think you really want to help. They were all told that they knew their families back home and they would harm their families, and they genuinely believed that, and there was that real risk. They definitely weren't living, and I think as time went on, it was very apparent that the control became more and more, and that's whenever the force became more. What they were put through was just absolutely horrific. They'd no quality of life. Being in a country on your own at times, having nowhere to turn because she did have that distrust. She didn't know anybody, she didn't know where to go.
Detectives moved quickly to gather evidence, but also to see to the victims' welfare.
When we deal with victims of human trafficking in Northern Ireland, our priority for them is to get them support and access to services. Support from Women's Aid, it gives them access to doctors and health, so that was something that we ensured from the outset that they got.
There was ourselves, the police and Red Cross, and also interpreters, which were added into the mix as well because the women were foreign nationals, didn't speak English. So we sat with each woman and explained what our service was and what we could provide and had an open conversation with them.
The women were very fearful because they didn't understand what was happening.
It's lovely really to meet you. My name is Heather and I work for Belfast and Lisbon Women's Aid and I support female victims.
Some of the young women, their clothing looked as if they hadn't been changed in a long time. They looked as if they hadn't had facilities for showers for a long time. We did one-to-ones with them and made them understand that, you know, this wasn't their fault, this was a crime against them, and that the police were investigating. At that stage, the women didn't want to engage. But we did give them our telephone numbers and our names, and later that week, some of the women got in contact with us, and we were able to carry on building a relationship with the women and give them that one-to-one support.
After Ankuta was arrested, it was strange for her to be gone. She had such power over me, now it was gone.
It was an intense 48 hours following that day of action as we brought suspects to custody, executing European arrest warrants, bringing the victims into places of safety, debriefing them and telling them what we knew and getting their support. It was an intense time. I don't think the investigation team slept for 2 days.
In Northern Ireland, there are good measures for protection of victims, very good measures, probably amongst the best in Europe. There was a very pragmatic approach, particularly with Women's Aid, who worked very closely with Police Service of Northern Ireland. So support mechanisms were there because of people on the ground.
Trauma really impacts really deeply, and you can have a freeze response. And that's what I think we seen that day. Those women were just frozen and they didn't really want to engage. They didn't know what was happening. While it was very well explained to them what was happening, they were still traumatised by this. They came back to us and we were able to build a much better rapport, a much better understanding of what they had been through. They were able to share their experience much better.
I met thousands of times with police, social workers, people that helped me. Looking back, I never wanted any of this to happen. And it took a lot of talking to process what had happened to me.
We would work extensively with them. We got them into counselling, so there was a lot of support given to help them understand the impact of what had actually happened. Those women have told us during the act of sex, that unwanted sex, rape, which is what it, when you break it down, that's what it is.
They treated me brutally. Only animals can do that to people. If I'm saying no, they have no heart. They sell people who are living.
There's a process the brain would go through that they take themselves off into another place, so you can disconnect as well.
She said, one day I'll put a knife in you.
With human trafficking, we work extensively over a long period of time with women. But this one, I think it was a month or so before they returned home, but it was extensive work.
Detectives and prosecutors now began to prepare for trial. Their case relied heavily on evidence from witness A and B, but both women were still vulnerable to threats of violence from the gang.
After the police arrested the ringleaders and rescued the other girls, I had to step back. They had always threatened my family right from the start, so I couldn't risk going to court. I couldn't do a statement. I had too much fear for my family and for my safety.
Witness A withdrew from the trial. It was a serious blow to the case.
We needed the victim testimony. We needed that victim evidence to say how this actually occurred and the level of control and fear that they had, because that was the really impactful aspect of this case, to show that level of control, coercion, and exploitation.
Now the entire case rested on witness B agreeing to take part in the trial.
She was scared what could happen if I start to give evidence. What will happen to my family? What will happen to my life? She was in a very vulnerable situation. When she decided to go along and give a statement, I think she felt it was the right thing to do.
I managed to pull myself together, but inside I still feel like a small, anxious girl.
Witness B's corporation ensured a trial could go ahead.
We made a decision in the large stage of the investigation that it was more effective to have the prosecution in Stockholm. We were able to use different forms of evidence. We were able to use the telephone intercept evidence. It resulted in the suspects being extradited to Stockholm.
They were immediately extradited to Sweden. The trial took place there. Myself and a colleague interviewed Ankudda Swartz in the prison. She said she wasn't a controller. She didn't take any money, denied any responsibility, any knowledge. She then said that Ilya Annett, who was her partner, who she had a child with, he was actually controlling her, and that she tried to then say that she was a victim. She changed her story.
It would now be up to the court to decide the truth. Witness B's evidence could not have been more important.
My name is Eva Windsau, and I work at the National Public Prosecution Department. We work with organized crime in Stockholm.
Witness B's testimony was vital to Eva's case, but she was concerned the pressure might be too much for her.
How will this victim be able to talk in front of them? It could have ruined everything if she hadn't been able to speak out and tell her story in the courtroom. I didn't know if she were going to manage that.
Ilya became very angry when he found out that witness B should give statements, so he threatened. He said during the interrogation, "I will kill her," tried to threaten a witness.
Eva petitioned the court to spare witness B from testifying in front of the people who had trafficked and controlled her.
I was a bit nervous, so I think we had done everything we could do. I remember that first day when the court had the pause and was thinking about, will we accept this request or not? They said no. Then I was, oh God, are we going to manage this or not?
Witness B now took to the stand and faced her traffickers.
I was worried that she wouldn't manage to give her story in front of the suspects. I think she found it very hard to sit in front of the suspect to tell her story, but she did. She did very well.
The trial lasted nearly 2 months. At the end, Annett and Swartz were found guilty of human trafficking and controlling prostitution.
I think the work that we'd done, that we were satisfied that there was no way they were going to avoid a conviction. Ultimately, it was successful, and we were able to then identify more victims who were previously or currently being exploited.
When we spoke to witness B as a victim in Sweden, the one thing I would say was the difference in her demeanour. It was unbelievable. She was confident. She obviously could speak a bit of English at that stage. She was happy. She was hugging us. The Swedish police had obviously done so much to gain her trust and turn her life around.
We were very pleased, and that's sad because it's quite rare that we manage to prosecute and get a conviction for human trafficking. So that was very good for our team and for the police team as well.
Annette and Schwartz were both sentenced to 4 years in prison to be served in Sweden.
The sentences, though, were light. People would say, is that enough for what they committed? The sentencing is a matter for the courts, and we won't make judgment on that. But it was a prosecution.
The suspects were jailed in Sweden, and detectives had a strategy for making sure they also faced justice for their crimes in Northern Ireland.
The agreement was that when they were released, we would then extradite them to Belfast, and they would come into Belfast courts and we would prosecute them for the criminality here. So I think when they were released from prison in Stockholm, they expected to return home, and I think the disappointment they had that they thought they were going to walk away from this was evident at the time. We brought them back to Belfast and they were remanded back into custody.
However, laws in Northern Ireland and Sweden are different, so the team could not rely on using all of the same evidence again.
In Sweden, they are allowed to use telephone intercept. In the UK and including Northern Ireland, telephone intercept is not allowed to be used in evidence.
But prosecution lawyers had already prepared a way to make sure the contents of the recordings could be shared with the court. Per himself would describe what he heard.
When they were planning the trial in Belfast, I was asked to come over and give a statement about what we had found out on the wiretaps, because in Northern Ireland you can't use the wiretap, but I could have told them what we hear on the tapes.
Faced with Per's testimony, Annette and Schwartz each pleaded guilty to human trafficking, controlling prostitution, and money laundering. They were sentenced to a further 2 years in prison.
I think what was done on this joint investigation team with prosecutions in one country and then, doing prosecutions in another jurisdiction, I really think it's a great model. And if somebody decides they're going to commit crimes in 2 jurisdictions, you should expect to face the penalties of 2 jurisdictions.
I would hope in the future that we would see longer sentences that would reflect the type of abuse and criminality that they've inflicted on the victims. But I think we did see a change as a result of this investigation. We certainly saw the disruption of the crime group. We certainly saw the victims being rescued and removed from this exploitation.
The perpetrators may have been brought to justice in 2 jurisdictions, but the market for women trafficked for sex remained.
If you sell drugs, you sell them as a one-off. You sell a woman, and you can sell her over and over and over again. It's a multi-million-pound business.
From the 1st of January 2024 to the 31st of December 2024, we supported 473 women just in human trafficking. We had 129 children and we had 47 pregnancies.
When those women are sitting and a man walks through that door, she doesn't know what she's going to experience. She doesn't know the level of violence she's going to experience, how her body's going to be violated for money. This is definitely exploitation, and anybody that is using a woman who has been trafficked, it's a rape.
For witness A, having her abusers behind bars gave her the courage to speak out and advocate for the change in the law to make buying sex illegal.
impression upon Northern Ireland, what we will bring is that it's a safe place for people to come, and that would be a definite moment in the making of history of this country.
In 2013, Lord Morrow drafted a bill which was presented before the Northern Ireland Assembly.
The private member's bill includes a clause which would criminalise people paying someone for sex.
The logic behind this clause is clear. It seeks to reduce demand for sexual services, which has been a major driver for human trafficking in our province.
In December 2014, 2.5 years after Witness A contacted police in Belfast, the bill was passed into law.
There'll always be a case for criminalising and legislating that, but I think education is by far going to be the most successful way to deal with this demand.
This crime is about vulnerability, and the money it generates all comes from that money that goes in at the bottom.
I think the public, in general, needs to understand that buying girls for sexual purposes is just feeding the organized crime.
I think if we're going to predominantly men who are buying sexual services, do you actually know what is behind this? Do you understand the harm you may be causing? Do you understand the revenue that you're generating for the crime group, that you're funding the exploitation of women?
It's still an issue. It's still growing very much. There's still a lot of it that is quite hidden out there. That's why we do the raising awareness for people to actually look out, and if they do see something different that's happening out there on the streets, to make police aware of it, because that's the only way we're ever going to win.
This case was actually in some ways quite groundbreaking, but human trafficking isn't going away, and it's something that we continuously, actively pursue and are so dedicated to doing it. It means a lot to me personally. I'm now the DI in that team. We're working with victims, so we will take every step, do everything in our power to make sure that we eradicate it as best we can.
As a result of the investigation, 13 women were rescued from sex trafficking. Witnesses A and B each now live free in Europe under new identities.
I know that whilst it was horrific, both those witnesses are okay. And it's really nice to see.
You have to be glad for when you succeed. Yeah, I'm proud for our division, also for the PSNI. It was a good case.
We're able to bring all the tactics, all the capability, and all the expertise within the PSNI and European law enforcement working with us to stop this crime. And that's why I'll never forget this crime.
Now I'm wiser. And going through that experience, it gave me more strength because I can appreciate my value as a person, as a human being, and even as a woman. I have reasons to live today, and that will not be taken away.